So this is about to be very ironic considering that I have some content about a woman or just women saying no in general, because there is a set of Kenyan triplets who have agreed to marry the same man and they are currently dating him right now. And I know this isn't the first time that I'm talking about this, and I'm probably repeating a joke when I say this, but Nescafe. Now, considering that this isn't the first case that I've heard, like this is actually the second case of triplets choosing to be with the same guy. And considering that this same week, I actually heard of a story of some twins that were dating and married the same guy, even without him knowing about it. I have got to ask the ladies, because this question definitely needs to be asked. If triplets, siblings, can choose to date and marry the same guy, what's stopping you from letting me date you and your friend? I need to ask that question real quick, because someone needs to tell me exactly what is wrong here, because we are seeing siblings, birds of a feather. Actually, fuck that. Feathers of the same bird that are choosing to be with one man and choosing to get into holy matrimony with that same man. And you're telling me that you and your friend, y'all aren't even related. She's not your cousin. You're very fine. You're very sexy friend. The friend that one of my homies supposedly says gives some of the best head. You're telling me that I should not date the both of you at the same time. Why? Like, why can't you guys come together and decide to, be with me? We haven't heard of any twin guys that are marrying the same woman. It's usually the twin babes that are marrying the same guy. And it's actually a very interesting phenomenon, because all of these babes are like, you know what? We saw this guy, we actually kind of liked him, and they're like, you know what? We'd probably be with him. Yeah, I like him too. Yeah, I like him 3. And you're seeing that the both of them are choosing to be with this guy, and they're perfectly okay with it. They've properly agreed that, you know what, instead of us fussing around and dating, different guys and shit, like, we can actually date this one guy and be happy from him. Because I actually saw clips of the video where the 3 of these Kenyan babes were being interviewed. And hell, like, they were even being asked about the whole sex thing. Because I'm sure that's most of the guys that are thinking about the sex thing. They're thinking, oh my goodness, this is a foursome straight away. And these babes are like, no, we're not going to have a foursome with him. It's not all of us or some of us that are going to be banging him at the same time. If it's Monday, he can bang this one. On Tuesday, he can bang this other one. And on Wednesday, he can bang me and shit. Like, they sort of had a system for it. And this guy might have a preferred pussy that he might like, or a preferred personality, but either way it's the same babe. And in some ways, this guy got 3 for 1. It was a nice 3 for 1 special, or the Nescafe joke that I'm sure a bunch of y'all must have missed. And he's probably happy. Although I do feel sorry for the kids. Like, if these guys are actually to have any kids with this one man, then I do genuinely feel sorry for them. Because imagine you are having a bit of a spout, you've kind of lost your shit, you're not in the best mood, and then your aunt, or in this case, one of your moms, decides to say some shit to you. You don't like it and you decide to talk back. Then you get smacked by this woman. And then in typical African style, she starts telling you not to disrespect her because she's older than you and you're not supposed to talk back to your elders. And then she's like, what the hell do I look like? Your mother. And then at that point, because you've been smacked and you're probably a little confused, you end up saying yes. Then you get smacked again. Like, life is gonna be hard for those kids. Imagine trying to confide in your mom just to notice that this one doesn't have the same information as the other mom, and then now you have to catch them up. So it's like you have to explain a bunch of stories and leave the history like one mom versus another mom versus another mom. And that time you only have a couple of minutes to go and break down an entire story to them. Like, that shit's gonna be hard. But anyways, that said, I should definitely start the podcast because I think I've joked about this shit for a little too long, and some people won't think I'm serious, not unless if I start by saying, welcome to Breaktime on West Side, your number 1 Breaktime podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who likes things in twos. Now, I'm not talking about twins, I'm actually talking about booty, because, you can't have like a single ass and shit. He's a man who's currently enjoying cardio running his mouth. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. The show is Tweetstreet, the show where we take a deep dive into Twitter, pull up a couple of tweets and break them down a little bit. Now, as usual, if you know the drill, then you can repeat it along with me because it almost sounds like a song and I say it all the time when I start Tweetstreet. And if you don't know the song, then you can listen. So at the next time you're hearing Tweetstreet, it can just ring in your head almost as if it's one of those like choruses like Baby Shark. Because it's a very simple drill on how you can submit the tweets that I can discuss on this episode, and it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal Twitter handle, and I will take it from there and handle it accordingly. On Facebook and on Instagram, if it happens to be a screenshot or a screen grab or even a screen video of a tweet that was on Twitter but ended up there, then you send it to @BreakTimeOnWestside on Facebook and on IG as well. Now, I do want to get into the tweets because we have 3 tweets because triplets. But before I do that, considering that we started with multiples and they were definitely more than one, in that very same spirit, I do have 2 things to talk about before I get into the 3 tweets that I do want to discuss. Now, the first story is actually a bit of a sad story. Now, a man by the name of Christian Tobechukwu Obumseli was stabbed and killed in his Miami condo by his girlfriend and Instagram model known as Courtney Taylor. Now, so far, according to Miami PD and a bunch of the reports that were coming online, one person has been detained. They aren't saying who, but considering that this was one of those stories that a lot of people were saying will be silenced by media and won't be talked about, I figured I might as well do that because this is a podcast that speaks for men and is hosted by a man, so I might as well bring this story up in the light of the fact that a lot of people talk about gender-based violence and they only stick to the stories of the woman being harmed. This is a classic case of a guy being harmed, and I figured I might as well just put it out there so that people can know that it happens both ways. It's not just guys that harm women. So just figured I should say that. Now, moving it on with the Instagram celebrities, Kim K is a bit of an interesting character. Now, for those of you that know what made Kim K, it's the sex tape. And people have known about it, people spoke about it up until that became old news because Kim K drowned it with other shit that she did. But unfortunately, even though most of us decided to let that shit go, it seems like the internet did not let her actually rest from all of this, because while her son Saint was playing the video game Roblox, he ended up stumbling onto an ad which was claiming that there was an unreleased tape with Ray J. And he decided to go and talk to his mom about it, and according to Kim K, she said, and I quote, "If he was a little bit older, I'd have died inside." Now, after this, she ended up calling Kanye about the entire thing, and I haven't heard much else about that shit. I'm guessing because of the time that I'm recording this. But I'm gonna be very honest about this. A lot of the older folk that heard this story, a lot of the mature people that were out there when they heard a story like this, actually spoke about how this was actually very, very negative, and considering that she got famous because of it, it was actually a bad thing. Because if she ever decided to have kids, that would end up hurting their reputation, and it would actually end up hurting the kids on a mental level as they're growing up over the years. Because imagine you're walking around school, you have an argument with a bully, and they start talking about how your mom is famous because of a sex tape, or how they were jerking off to your mom last night. Like, that shit is actually very, very hurtful. And you end up encountering a lot of that kind of talk when you start getting into your teens. Like, kids can have mad burns, but when you get to your teenage years, that's when shit takes a whole new level to it, and you're probably not prepared for it. And unfortunately, it seems like whatever it is that they said has come true. The prophecy of doom is actually coming to fruition. Although at the same time, in as much as I can say that yes, all of this is her fault, I feel like to a massive degree, it's not even her who's behind all of this shit. Like, the person that I blame isn't her. It's not even Kris Jenner, who I believe is one who leaked the original sex tape. It's Wack 100. Wack 100, for those of y'all that don't know, used to be Ray J's manager and brought up the story towards the end of 2021 when he was talking about how there's like another unreleased copy of the sex tape which has even more interesting scenes and blah blah blah. sort of like a Kim K sex tape part 2. He spoke about it. Some people called it shit. Apparently Kanye went and got like the laptop with everything from Ray J and shit. And it was a pretty big story that kind of gave him quite a bit of clout for a little bit. Now, before he spoke about the whole sex tape part 2, the whole sequel to the sex tape and shit, people didn't really talk about that sex tape as much. Like most people, I'd say a majority of the people that know about it haven't spoken about it in years. And those of us that actually talk about it, because I will admit I have spoken about it before, will either talk about how Kris Jenner was a mad genius for using that to make Kim K famous, or we'll talk about stuff that relates to that in porn and shit, but we don't really talk about that sex tape all that much. Like there's a very, very small niche of us that do, but it's usually from like a case study standpoint, because there's no one else who's actually pulled off what it is that Kris Jenner and the Kardashians did with that sex tape, because they took something that would have been very damning and they turned it into massive fame. And it's not like people haven't tried. People have gone and released sex tapes. People have tried to be all sexual and shit, but they haven't gotten to the level that the Kardashians have. But with that said and done, people don't really talk about the sex tape all that much. Like, I wouldn't expect kids in their teens even right now to really know about Kim Kardashian's sex tape. They'll just know that she's a celebrity influencer and she's on Keeping Up with the Kardashians. People don't talk about the sex tape all that much. So for him to bring this story back, he's probably the reason for all of this, and it's very shitty what he did, because now he's actually scarring those kids now for real and they're suffering from all of this. And frankly, considering that it was just for clout, it seems like a very low thing that he did. Like dredging up the past like that was some very low ball shit. But anyways, I guess it's just them, that celebrity shit. Let me move it on to the more realistic shit and get it on with the tweets. So on to our very first tweet. One thing about dating an older man, he will not argue with you. Actually, I'd probably rephrase this from an older man to a more mature man. Like, I think using older man in the general term is a little bit misleading, because there's guys that are like 3, 4, 5, 7 years older than the babe that they're dating, and they're more petty, they're more dramatic, and they cause more issues for the babe than even a guy her age would. Like, it's something that actually happens. There's babes who've told me of such stories. So that is something that I personally would not agree with if you're just putting age into the mix. But the more mature people are, the less that they want to argue about petty shit. And it's usually, if we're arguing, then let's argue about something that's significant and find some sort of resolution to this, or let's not argue about it at all. Or we just find the fastest way, the quickest way to end the argument without letting it blow out of proportion, because people will say things that they don't want to. Now, of course, it'll be something that isn't really age restrictive, because maturity isn't really a matter of age, as we've always known. And you will find that there's guys that are fairly young, the same age, hell, maybe even 1 or 2 years younger than the babe that they're dating, and they're incredibly more mature. Like, you find that their maturity levels are incredibly high. And it is something that you will see time and time again. Like, it's not like every single person that is like the same age as the babe will engage in arguments the same exact way. There's some guys who literally just put their foot down and they're like, no, we're not arguing this, we're not discussing this. And the babe literally just shuts the fuck up. And this is someone who might be younger than you. This is someone who might be the same age as you. But there's that respect that comes with the maturity that can actually allow you to have the power to do that. Now, don't get me wrong, age actually does play a huge factor in this, because when you actually kind of look at the guys that have like a 10, 12, 30 year difference with their babes, they don't engage in arguments like that. Hell, some of those guys are like 40, 50, 60 years old. Hell, if you're someone in your 20s and you're arguing with a 50-year-old man, like, do you honestly expect this guy to argue with you on the same level? Like, he doesn't have enough breaths in his life left to continue arguing like that. You probably have 2 or 3 times the number that's left in you as opposed to him. So why would he engage in an argument with you on that level? Like, there's definitely going to be that. Plus, when a babe is like at the same age with a guy, at times they do tend to think that the maturity level is the same, and sometimes the babe might feel like she might even be superior. So in some cases with a number of babes, they will want to challenge this guy's leadership a hell of a lot more. They will want to engage in arguments and sort of try and get to his level and sort of make it seem like it's a fair fight, so both of them should go at each other. But all in all, it is more of a maturity thing rather than an age thing. So while I don't entirely agree with it, I don't entirely disagree with it. But anyways, that said, let us move it on. So on to our very next tweet. Why does a man need to show you that he appreciates you and sees your worth and value through money? Ooh, this is a very interesting question. Interesting in that I'm sure there's a massive number of babes that are like, oh, it's not about the money, oh, it's not about the money. And weirdly enough, even when I'm looking through a lot of the comments and the stuff that people are saying, most of the babes, they usually just say, oh no, it's not about the money, oh, I don't do this because of the money, oh, it's rarely ever just the money, oh, it's the effort, oh, does he care, blah blah blah. But I'm gonna say something that's gonna sound fairly superficial but mostly true. A lot of times we don't actually need money to show love, but a lot of the ways in which people want to be treated so that they can feel loved actually requires money. Like it's actually a fact. It's actually a fact. And it's even worse with right now than it used to be before. Like if a babe right now tells me, oh, I'm not interested in the money, blah blah blah, there's a pretty good chance I'll just look at them and just conclude and say, you know what, bullshit. Like I feel like most babes don't want to make it look like they want a guy who has the money, or they're not all about the money just because they want a guy who has the money. And the problem is they end up using examples of people with money to make it look like, you know what, I'm not just after the money and shit. Yet in reality, you're not necessarily after the money, but you're after the benefits that require the money, so you're indirectly after the money. Like, it's literally just that. Because usually I will hear babes busy talking about how, oh, I'm not just a girl who's looking for a guy with money, oh, there has to be more to it, oh, it's not even something that I consider very openly because I went for a date with this guy and he blew all this cash on me, oh, he took me on this holiday, oh, there was this guy that I was dating who used to take me on trips, and I still ended the relationship. And in some ways, I'm busy sitting back and thinking, so because you turned down a guy who just so happened to spend a lot of money on you, does it mean that you weren't interested in the money, or does it mean that you weren't interested in the guy? Like, that's usually something that's ringing in my head whenever they tell me that shit. Because while you're busy saying all of that shit about how, oh, you've turned down expensive gifts and shit, like, is it that you're fluffing your own ego and trying to tell yourself, oh, it's not just about the money? Or are you bragging about the fact that you've turned down people with money so that you can make it seem like you're this much higher level person when it comes to your maturity and shit? Because honestly, to me, it sounds like it could be one of the two. If you wanted to tell me that you are not someone who values a man because of his money, if you wanted to tell me that, then go date a broke guy, date a guy that makes way less than you, and exist in that relationship and say that you love this man and you're staying with them, even though it's for a while. Do that shit, come back, tell me, you know what, I've dated broke guys who had nothing and I stayed with them. And at that point in time, I will sit back and I'll be like, you know what, probably you saw the vision in this man and you chose to be with him. There, I will accept you are not looking at the money. Like, say that you don't mind a small budget wedding. Say that you look up to the couple of the street people that decided to get married and they were very happily together even though they didn't have shit and they were, like street people. Like, there was a story about that, I think it was in 2020 or 2019 or some shit. Like, there was a story about that and it came out and people spoke about it. Now, tell me that you wouldn't mind being in such a position with your mans and I will accept that you are not about the money. But this shit that y'all are busy talking about, oh, I've turned down guys with money and shit, that's just bull. That's just stuff to fluff your ego. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting someone, and one of the reasons why you want them is the money. Just don't let the only reason that you want this person be the money, because the money will actually give more ways for you to be loved. Like the trips that you want to go on, that requires money. The fancy restaurant, that requires money. The nice gifts, that requires money as well. The problem is, right now, with the way a lot of babes talk online, it's like that's all that you guys are looking forward to, and as you're doing that, y'all are busy talking so much shit about broke guys, and now you'll never give a chance to a broke man. And you actually think that we don't look at babes nowadays and think, you know what, these babes just want the money. Like, come on, bruh. Anyways, let me leave it at that. We need to move things on and end things off with our very final tweet of this episode. I got proposed to last night. I said no. Okay, this is something that I definitely wanted to talk about, and I know that the podcast might even be a little bit longer. I might end up having to scrap off one tweet or something for the sake of time, but I knew that I had to talk about this on this episode because I feel like part of the reason why a lot of us guys are not approaching babes as much, we're being a lot more calculated and we're not taking that much of an effort with babes, is because of shit like this. The idea of the clout that comes with rejecting somebody and putting it up on social media. Like, that shit is very, very hurtful and painful to see, especially when you're that guy, but more so for the rest of us guys, it pushes us away because we do not want to be the next one on that chopping block. Like, babes used to do this way back in the day. Like, they'd turn down a guy on DMs, then they're taking the screenshot and they're posting it up and they're like, oh, these men today and shit. And babes still do that to this day. It's just that I think nowadays it's more of the standout people that, make a lot more of an effort than they probably should, or they don't read the signs and shit. And because a lot of us guys aren't very good at reading signs, we're not that well versed in body language, we end up missing the sign and we end up looking like a clown for that shit. And the fact that people have moved it up to proposals, like, that shit makes it even harder because now us guys will never consider proposing in public ever again. Hell, maybe even in private, because there's more and more guys that are starting to have this mentality of, you know what, go put a baby in a shorty that you actually like, and if you want to be with her, then you can decide after she tells you she's pregnant and shit. But the objective isn't getting married. Like, there's a lot of guys nowadays that are starting to stray from the idea of getting married. And shit like this, considering that it pushed a lot of guys from hitting on babes openly, might actually end up translating to a lot fewer guys making their proposals. And if you think I'm lying or I'm overstating this or I'm blowing it out of proportion, if you remember, I think it was in Battle of the Sexes episode 111. Or I think it was 109. I was talking about why it is guys don't approach babes anymore. Maybe I'm blowing up about all of that shit, but if you actually checked with a lot of the younger guys nowadays, guys are a lot more skeptical about getting into relationships. A lot of guys are actually starting to avoid the idea of getting into a relationship and actually trying to wait it out and go for something long term. You want to know the reason for that shit? A lot of people are posting up screenshots of guys when they're busy trying to be more vulnerable with their babes, and these babes are taking them for granted and treating them like shit. Like, there's screenshots that are coming up on that shit so much, and it seems like a clout chase. People talk about how much of a clout chase it is, but it doesn't mean that they've particularly gone down in the frequency that people are posting them up. And you can clearly see that guys nowadays are a lot more against the idea of treating a babe because they don't want to look like a simp. Guys nowadays are starting to get against the idea of getting into a relationship because they believe that everyone will cheat. Hell, even babes aren't getting into relationships because they think that everyone's going to cheat. But a lot of the times when you're going to ask the guys why, you end up being told stories about this shit, and you end up realizing that this is something that's actually happening, and it scared a lot of us guys away. But then again, maybe I'm wrong about this shit, maybe I'm blowing something up, but we'll see in the coming months and years how shit like this is actually going to affect relationships. But anyways, I want to know your thoughts on this. The DMs are open. On Twitter, it is @BugakaTheD, which happens to be my personal Twitter handle. On Facebook and on IG, it is @Breakdown on my side. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end. And if you are listening through Castbox, feel free to drop your thoughts and comments below, and I will attend to them accordingly. And I will catch you guys on the next break.